Hello and welcome to our presentation about artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? Broadly speaking, it's the capability of a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. So the key elements of that are as follows. Since this is supposed to mimic real human intelligence, you can liken it to the analogy of the learning process of a newborn baby. So the first stage is learning. You're just born. You don't know what's going on. All you can really do is absorb the world around you. Next is reasoning, where you're able to make the first stimuli-reaction connections in your mind. So you know that if you're hungry, you can cry, and chances are there's going to be a bottle headed your way. Next is problem solving. So here's where things can get a little bit more advanced. You recognize that if mom's not going to give you a cookie, dad probably will, because he's more pliable if mom's not in the room. Next is perception. So here's where you're able to start linking abstract concepts. So if you know that there's a moon in the book Goodnight Moon, and you know that there's a moon in the night sky, you can recognize them as distinct separate objects, but still make the connection between the two. Finally is language processing and communication. So you've gone through all of the above steps and you're ready to finally start making sentences and using syntax to communicate with the outside world. So what are some of the actual applications for artificial intelligence? Our first example is AI in radiology. So what we're looking at here in the back is actually a happy story in radiology. So the before picture, this person has a tumor the size of a golf ball pressing up against their brainstem. After the procedure, the tumor is gone. So that's phenomenal. But far too often what happens is the opposite. So what looks like a normal image can suddenly metastasize into a tumor. That's because if a tumor is not this size, it can look like nothing more than a few pixels of a shadow on an MRI. Now, it is the radiologist's job to be able to catch that, but the workload of modern radiologists mean that human error is inevitable. So if you're not able to catch that initial reading, then too often the tumor can then spread and look like that. So the most obvious application is radiology diagnostics using neural networks and machine learning. But there are also applications beyond just diagnostics. So for instance, Philips Lumio created a software that pulls to the forefront all of the medically relevant information of a patient, such as past labs, diagnostics, or notes that are relevant to the case at hand, whereas before a radiologist might have to sift through dozens or hundreds of imaging or documents. The value add for the industry example of autonomous vehicles is fairly self-evident. So what you could do with advanced enough AI is to 100% automate transportation, saving human labor and improving automobile safety. What we're looking at in the background here is Tesla Motors Autopilot. So you're able to see the car can keep its lane, it can keep its cruise control adjusted based on its surroundings, but the person is still required to have their hands on the wheel. The person is still required to keep their eyes on the road to be ready to take over at any moment. This is what's known as Level 2 SAE autonomous vehicles. Tesla's dream, as well as the dream of everyone else in the autonomous vehicle space, is to get to Level 5 SAE autonomous vehicles. What that would mean is you're able to enter a destination in your vehicle, kick back and relax, do whatever you want, knowing that your vehicle is going to get you to where you need to go. So now let's talk about the disruption potential of these technologies. Since AI is such a broad topic, we found it useful to examine the disruption potential within the lens of the two innovations we just discussed. So, AI in radiology. Will AI replace radiologists? Unlikely. I see AI as becoming more intertwined with radiologists' workflow, but not entirely disrupting it. So I would liken it to autopilot software that did not take pilots' jobs, but rather made their lives way easier. Human pilots are still there to take off and land, but autopilot is able to handle 95% of the things that could arise in a flight. So I see the same thing in radiology. So I found this quote fitting. Will AI replace radiologists? No, but radiologists who use AI will replace radiologists who don't. A big reason for that is this black box. So most people can understand inputs and outputs of AI, but this part is extremely opaque and difficult to understand without the technical background. So trust is paramount in healthcare, as well as a human connection. Due to that, we do not foresee AI entirely replacing radiologists. On the other hand, autonomous vehicles represent a market ripe for disruption. So what we're looking at here is a Tesla semi-truck. Commercial trucking companies have to employ human drivers to drive insanely long distances, well-compensated drivers no less, to move their goods to where they're going. So what that means is long hours behind the wheel, human fatigue sets in. With that comes errors and mistakes, and when you're talking about errors behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, that is deadly. So what autonomous vehicles could do in that market is entirely obliterate the need for a human driver. So this would allow the commercial trucking companies to cut down substantially on their overhead. So not only in that market, but think about taxis and Ubers. So if drunk people are suddenly able to get in there, climb into their vehicle, and get to where they're going without actually needing to drive, that would be a huge dent in the taxi service. Alright, so now let's look at our revenue estimates for the total market of AI over the next 10 years. How we went about this was we looked at the top 6 players operating in the market today. They total to about 85% of the total AI market. So we looked at the revenues, estimated how much of the revenues came from AI-related activities, and came up with our current estimate of $277 billion by adding up those estimates and then adding 15% back on it to account for the 15% of the market not shown here. Alright, so to come up with our 3-year estimate, we projected 2.5% year-over-year GDP growth and a 7.5% growth in the percentage of revenues coming from AI. So that gave us a 3-year total of $344 billion in the AI market. Using similar methodology, but a different assumption for the growth rates from years 3 to 5 of 10%, this gives us a total market of $416 billion. Finally, from years 5 to 10, we estimate an even higher proportion coming from AI, leading us to a total 10-year estimate of $750 billion. Alright, thanks very much for watching. Our time is over. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks. Bye.